Let's talk a little Wyoming, and then I want to give some props to a Texas player and give myself a little props. I made a Black Stradamus prediction about this player, and I think it actually may come to fruition this year, at least early on. There's signs that it could materialize. So we'll get into that coming up a little bit later on. Let's talk a little Wyoming. My biggest question going into the Wyoming game really has to be about what Texas's offensive strategy is going to be. If they're going to actually go in here and try and run the football. Because the truth is, Wyoming believes their strength of their defense is their defensive front. First of all, shout out to Oscar Giles, who's a defensive line coach. And so we know Oscar Giles can coach him up. He was once a coach here at the University of Texas and a lifetime Longhorn. So shout out to my man, Oscar Giles. It's going to be fun watching him on the sideline. But he's a D-line coach. And if you go talk to Craig Bowl, who's done some media availabilities, and I got you to listen to him, he pretty much is bullish on his defensive front. He loves his two defensive ends. He talks about them all the time, Devon Harris and Braden Siders. All right, those are his two. He talks about having veteran D-ends. He said part of it is we've got two experienced ends, and we've got one talented end, Sebastian Harsh. He said, I think getting a fourth end solidifies the front, but he talks about that they're deep enough where they're looking for their fourth defensive end. They also like their two starting D tackles. One is Nate. He's a nose tackle. It's Cole Godbolt. He is a nose tackle. They say he's a really good player on the defensive front. They have another defensive tackle who's an all-conference caliber player, Jordan Bartagnol. And also that Devon Harris defensive end, he is an all-conference selection for their preseason media selection. Also, Easton Gibbs, he's the middle linebacker, and he is a preseason Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year selection by their media. So that basically makes up their front, and they consider that to be their strength of their defense. Even Craig Bowl and even the defensive coordinator admits that their secondary is a bit of a work in progress. When he was asked, are you still happy with the three top cornerbacks from the spring, Colby Taylor, Ja'Cory Hawkins, Tyrekus Davis? I hope I got his name right. Didn't mispronounce that. But when he was asked about his secondary and those guys, and by the way, one of those players, Colby Taylor, ended up on the freaks list for Bruce Feldman and the Athletics. So he's a good player. He's their new starting cornerback, but he ended up on that list. Here is what the defensive coordinator said when he was asked about the secondary. He said, we're searching for the fourth cornerback. I mean, I think what happens at that position is when you practice day in and day out, there's a level of consistency that's required. I think we've been solid. We have a lot of room for improvement at that position overall. Do I like where we're at now compared to a year ago? Yes. Do I think we're a finished product or that's a strength of our defense? No. So even he's admitting openly. Is it a strength? No, not a strength of ours. Now, that's their weakness on defense because they're bullish and they brag about their defensive front, and that's where all of their all-conference players are. And Easton Gibbs is one of the best linebackers actually in the country. And then you have Texas, and Texas's strength on offense, which I think is their identity, is their passing game with all their weapons. X-Man, A.D. Mitchell, J.T. Sanders in the passing game, Jay Witt, and you have Quinn Ewers right now playing at a really high level. The offensive line's pass blocking versus Alabama was probably the best we've seen that group pass block, and I don't know, since Sark has been here. I mean, that was a really spectacular high-level performance. So Texas, if you look at how you game plan to try to exploit their weaknesses. And if it is a situation where their weaknesses conveniently align with your strengths, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Like, oh no, we're gonna throw the ball against them. That's their weakness. Their defensive front, you want to run the football. That's their strength. Rice was able to, I would say, frustrate Texas in the run game, not stop them on new shot, but frustrate Texas in the run game. That's what Wyoming's gonna hope to do. Frustrate Texas in the running game, and then what they're watching that Rice film, I assure you, and saying, listen, if Rice can give the offensive line issues with simulated pressures, some ghost and amoeba front, second level pressures, and really trying to blow up the play with run blitzes, we can do the same thing too. And I think they're watching the Rice film, not the Alabama film, because they can't replicate what Alabama does. But they're watching the Rice film saying, hey, man, we actually have a chance to execute some of the concepts that Rice was successfully executing versus Texas.
Yeah, and you know that they're going to try to shorten the game, right? I mean, they're a run-heavy team on offense. They run the football so far in 2 games, wins over Texas Tech and then Portland State, where they won 31-17. They've only attempted 50 passes in the first 2 weeks compared to over 80 rushes. They're going to try to run the ball, and they get a running back this year this week that they haven't had so far, Harrison Whaley, who's a transfer from Northern Illinois through the portal. They're going to try to run the football, Rod. They got a big 6'7" left tackle who's an all-conference player in the Mountain West. They're going to see if they can run it, but that doesn't seem to do very well against Texas right now. They'd like to shorten the game because their quarterback's a kid named Andrew Peasley, who's a sixth-year player.
He's a decent player, man. He's got grit. He's a gritty player.
He's a tough guy. You saw that against Texas Tech. He kind of gritted them to that overtime win after falling behind 17-0.
He's not a great quarterback, but damn, he's a gritty football player, man. He makes plays in crucial moments, in big moments.
He does.
It ain't pretty, though.
Well, 6th year. Right? He's been playing a lot of college football. They got a veteran team, right? 17 returning starters, 10 on the defense. So, it doesn't mean they're as good as Texas or as talented as Texas, but they know how to play football, and that'll be the challenge. You're right about the game plan. Do they try to bang their head against the wall and establish a run if you're Sark, or do you try to attack that secondary and then work on the run once you build a lead? I would imagine that could be a plan as well. But what you don't want is Wyoming to slow this game down, start converting, moving the chains, because they're going to try to bleed this clock and make this a shorter game.
And that's what could happen
as they can.
If you want to run it, you almost help them.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Help them kind of bleed the clock and slow it down.
Or if you go to the pass side and your quarterback's having an off night, now you're throwing incomplete passes. But either way, I agree with you. Attack their weakness with your strength.
So it's just going to be interesting because I know Sark wants to see some consistency in the running game, and I think he wants to infuse some confidence in the running game because you really haven't had consistency in the running game the first 2 games. At Alabama, you closed the game with the running game, and against Rice, you ran it in the second half consistently, but in the first half, that wasn't the case. So there is some incentive for Sark to come in here and run the football, but like I said, then you're kind of playing into their strength defensively. That's what I believe they want. So it'll be interesting to see what Sark decides to do. But yeah, offensively for them, they do run it a lot, but this quarterback, he scrambles a lot too.
Yeah, he does.
So some of those
off-schedule plays.
Yes, he loves second reaction plays. So some of those runs are actually quarterback scrambles too, and they like the quarterback run game. He's dealing with a shoulder injury, is what being reported. So he was day to day. I'm sure he's going to end up playing, but I don't know how much they want to run him versus Texas, considering
they have the Mountain West coming.
Yes, and they think they might be pretty good.
They can be a player in the Mountain West Conference.
They think they might have a chance to make a bowl game and compete in that conference. So that may be ill-advised versus Texas. They might be thinking long-term.
Maybe so. And Texas is thinking long-term, too. And handle your business. A 28.5-point favorite as we sit here on this rainy Thursday morning.